Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. We are starting chapter 14 of Bhagavad Gita, and it's all about three gunas. We're going to start with Yogeshwar talking about the gunas, and then we're going to dive into the chapter itself. So Yogeshwar, please take your time. Go ahead.
The three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tama. First, a very brief understanding about the three gunas. Out of the three, we are very familiar with two, which is rajas and tamas. Tamas could be classified as when you're sleepy or when you do not feel like doing anything. So pramada, alasya, and nidra. Alasya meaning that you don't feel like doing anything. You just seated in the couch, but then you don't feel like moving. So tamasa is a quality of Prakruti. It's a quality of Maya that brings about laziness so much and sleepiness. So that aspect of life we know. Then we also know an aspect of life that makes us go into activity. Mainly, for example, we could take an example of competition or getting to a goal, getting towards a goal. It makes us move. It makes us do some action. That is rajas. And we could put that aspect into all parts of life, like from daily life to your whole life, even to different occupations that happens, even to different types of people, because now when you make it broader, first we'll look at it in a broader perspective, whereby we know some people who by nature, they just feel lazy whenever they want to do any work. Whenever you tell them about any work, they just want to sit back. Or you know people who sleep a lot. That is tamo pradhan. And then we also know people who can burn the midnight candle, they can read a lot, they can do a lot of work within the day. They can spend more hours working than sleeping. That is a person who is mainly into rajas. Looking at types of occupations, yeah, mostly all types of occupations that we have right now are rajas pradhan. Like our whole world right now is raja pradhan, whereby whether it is work that you need to do, like maybe even going to an office, or you need to read a book, or you need to do, because everything right now in the world, whatever is awarded, whatever is rewarded in the world is raja pradhan. In that perspective, most of the occupations that we know right now are prominent of raja. Now, when I talk about prominence or pradhana, meaning that all the three guns or the three qualities are there by nature. It's just that one is more prominent in a person, in a situation, in an occupation, whatever you'd like to take. There is nothing that is void of all the three. And by that, I don't mean that one must be there in each and every one. I mean, all the three must be there in each and every one, in each and every situation, in each and every occupation. All the three are there. It's just the prominence of that It's just that that guna, that quality dominates the other two, that we see it more prominent. Even in something like a game, for example, we know games like racing games or action games, those are more rajo prominent. They're more towards action. They make your mind move because they have a goal to reach. They always put small goals for you to reach at small stages. And then within them, like for example, if it's an action game, there is that part of Rajogun. But then action games which involve so much blood or they involve so much of anger that can make you angry. For example, games that have fighting a lot. Such games are now tamo pradhan. They are prominent with tamo gun because krodha, as we know, anger, is part of tamo gun. All the action we know in this world is brought about by these three qualities. Even, for example, we may do some action right now. We may go to someone and talk to them. But then is that conversation on the basis of anger? Then it is tamoga. Or is it on the basis that you want something from him? You want to gain something from him. You want to reach a goal. Then it is raja pradhan. It is prominent with raja gun. That we see so much in the world today. So we can take it from the broadest, meaning somebody's life, some people's life, or in history, you can see some people are Rajo Pradhan, some people are Tama Pradhan. And then we can also bring it certainly like closer to us, whereby in our daily emotions, we have Tamogun at some points in time. We may, in general, we may be Rajogun, like we may be mostly active in our time. But then there are also those times whereby we are active through anger. When we are active through anger, what that means is we are active in a way of tamogun. We are not active in the way of rajogun. So we have talked about action, which can be tamogun or rajogun. Now, even sleeping in that way can be rajogun and tamogun, whereby you sleep and you only feel like sleeping, then it's tamoguni. But then there are also those people who sleep only to get up onto their feet the next day to achieve their goals. That is rajoguni, prominent sleeping. Now, we've talked about rajoguni and tamoguni. Why I started with these two is that we know them prominently. That's what dominates our life at this point in time. And it's really important for us to understand what that is. Whether we are sleeping, whether we are angry, or whether we are active, it's not that all action is Rajoguni. Yes, some action is also Tamoguni. And it's not that all sleeping or all laziness is Tamoguni. There's also that sleeping that is Rajoguni. Having understood that, let's move on to Sattva Guna. Sattva Guna is a bit difficult to talk about because you can't see it from the top. For example, if you see a person is always lazy and always wants to sleep, you know that person is tamoguni. If you know a person is always active most part of his life, then you know his raja pradhana. There is prominence of rajogun in him. How do you know a person is sattva guni? Because the only two things a person can do is either move in action or sit down in inaction from the outside. Those are the only two things we can see. How do we know what sattva gun is? How do we get to the level of sattva gun? Sattva gun in this perspective is, it also comes in action in a different way. Certainly, for example, if I could talk about fighting, yes? Now, fighting mostly, because if it brings up anger, then we put it in the category of tamogun. But then I would like you to consider fighting in the perspective of, if you've watched the Chinese movies, the way they fight, it is with grace, utmost grace. That fighting, even though they are fighting, you can see the sattva gun in the fighting. You can see the grace and the bliss in the fighting. The fighting that is brought up by Shaolin, the fighting that is brought up in those regions of China, Japan, those types of fighting, they are brought up in sattva gun. Even in our daily lives, for example, if we give someone something, maybe we make a donation or we just help out somebody. Mostly, as we know it, it's rajogun because it's an activity of helping. And when there is that reflex that I want something back, or you help that person only to get something from him, to achieve a goal, then we know that is rajoguni. A step ahead. That is fine. But then when we do something out of love, or when we do something without that expectation of getting back, without the expectation of maybe my goal will be fulfilled when I provide to somebody in need, then that becomes sattva guna. Each and every activity in our life, whether it is action or sleeping as well, can become sattva guna. Sleeping in sattva guna would mean that we've looked at tamogun, a person who is lazy and sleeps out of sheer laziness. Then we've talked about rajoguni sleeping, whereby you sleep just because you're tired of walking and you want to get all the energy to walk the next day. That's the only reason you sleep. And when you wake up, you're directly on your feet. That's rajoguni. Now, what sattva-guni sleeping means is that you're sleeping. And then when you wake up, there's no hurry in waking up, and there's no pullback like in tamogun in waking up. You just wake up normally, in just that your sleep has broken, you've woken up naturally. Just because it's the time to wake up, not because something is calling you or something is pulling you back. When something is calling you to wake up, that is rajogun. When something is pulling you back to sleep, that is tamogun. But when you wake up, when there's nothing pulling or pushing you, that is out of sattva gun. That you know that you've slept in sattva gun. And then there are also those other activities that are sattva gun prominent. For example, things like donation. These days, even donation has become more of rajoguni, whereby people make donations just for their fame to be brought up, for their prestige, or for their name to be shown in television, or for them to be known in society. Or even somebody will give donation because he has this perspective that I will get something back in the future through this donation. Even that as well is in Rajogun. Take the perspective of donation and then make it out of love. Make the donation because it is supposed to be done. Make the donation not because you want something back, but make the donation because the other person needs it. That donation will be out of sattva. And that donation will bring a bliss upon you. Because the prestige, certainly what will happen, the prestige will bring the attraction, but then it won't be able to bring the bliss upon you. The shanti, the peace that you need, the peace of mind, that will not be. And now we talk about these three more certainly, meaning in mental states. You can't be fully awake like we are right now conversing. When you feel sleepy, even while conversing, your mind is roaming away while conversing. That is tamoguni. When you're fully active in the conversation, that will be rajoguni, because you want something out of the conversation. Even though you want knowledge out of the conversation, that's why you're attentive. Then it is rajoguni still. This is something subtle that has to be paid attention to. And then there is that listening that comes out of love. There is that listening that comes out of nature, that's out of your swabhav. You listen not because you want something out of it. You listen because it is something to be listened to, something worth listening to. And when you listen to it, there is this bliss that comes upon you. There is this sattva gun now that you also are bathed with. That's why you listen to it. That is listening to it with sattva gun. Each and every activity will have these three qualities. Depends on the person how he wants to manifest the three qualities in his life. And going further, when we do not feel like thinking about anything, or our mind is meandering in thoughts, that is tamoguni. Normally we would want to think that when our mind is active, it is rajoguni. But then just take the perspective, it's not active in one thing, it's meandering onto so many things. That is tamoguni. When it is active within one particular activity, when it is fully engaged, that is rajoguni. And then there is this state of mind whereby your mind is totally attentive. It's open. It's open and attentive. Normally, sattva guna is something hard to understand because we're not really in touch with it. We do not get to it so many times in our life. If we want to achieve something, then we're always in rajoguna. Like there is this objective that is put in front of us. But what sattva guna does is don't put any objective in front of you. Just do the activity for what it is supposed to be done. You're listening. Now, how I would like to put upon it is you're open to everything, like your mind is open and is fully attentive. So two perspectives. When we say open, do not take the meandering of tamoga. It's not meandering, it's just open, but it's in one place. And then when we say active, Do not take the Rajogun part of it, that it is fully active. It is paying attention and is open. That is Sattva Gun, whereby it is its nature to be that. There is no goal put to it. So it is not active because of a goal. It is active because it's its nature. That will be Sattva Gun. We've talked about bodily perspectives and mental perspectives, even emotional perspectives of it. Anger is Tamoguni. Sleeping is Tamoguni. Laziness, not wanting to do any activity. You may be awake, not sleeping. You may be awake, but you do not want to do any activity. That is laziness, and that is Tamoguni. Kamaha, meaning icha, meaning a desire. When you always have an objective in front of you, all your emotions are directed towards the objective. You are constantly being motivated by the objective. Then that is Rajoguni. When you're doing an activity just because it's your nature, for example, we get to know this at some points in our life. For example, we're doing our hobby, let's say painting. We've done all the work through the whole day. That may be due to an objective, but when we come home at the end of the day, there will be this time when we sit back and we're just focusing on a painting. There's no objective to that painting. You're just doing it because it's your hobby. You're doing it because it flows out of you naturally. That is Sattva Guna. It's important to realize where a particular quality, particular guna touches us in our life. When we notice it is when we can multiply it, is when we can manifest it more within our lives. If we do not even realize it, how can we manifest it within our lives? How can we make each and every activity full of Sattva Guna? And then do not only take the broader perspective, because when we say somebody is sleeping, it's Tamoguni, or when somebody is active, it's Rajoguni. So you should take the perspective that is unique, whereby Sattva Guna itself can be in any activity or any inaction. Sattva Guna itself is nature, and nature has action and inaction filled within itself. If you don't have an objective, but you are walking, that is Sattva Guna. When you're sleeping out of your swabhava, just because your natural work day has ended and sleep just comes, you accept it. That is out of Sattva Guna. Having realized these three qualities, how to manifest them? If you want to really manifest Tamoguna, which is laziness, sleeping, or laziness, and then also through anger is it manifested. Then as well, there are some types of food that take you towards that. Something like tamoguni food, yeah. Something like that makes which makes you lazy is something whereby you eat so much food and then you just feel like sleeping. So when you eat so much food, then you've brought on tamogun upon yourself. Rajogun, how to manifest it, is putting a desire, an objective in front of us, which we are normally in our daily life put into. All the normal books that we read, all the normal literature that we have today, it puts an objective in front of you and it tells you to run towards it. If you want to achieve something in today's life, there is normally an objective. There is competition that you have between your colleagues. That will take you ahead. That brings up Rajogun. And then certain types of food. For example, eating something that is eating something that is chilly in nature. It brings up all the Rajogun within you. Or eating something that makes your emotions feel more of desire. Now, normally we'd feel like, oh, eating is a normal thing that we should do. We can eat anything. But yes, it is true we can eat anything that we feel like. But there are these certain types of food that bring you to a certain type of guna. Specifically, like if we talk about these types of food that are very sweet, they take you towards Rajogun. And these types of food, like a hamburger or those heavy foods, let's say, they take you towards Tamogun because they make you sleep. They're heavy on your body. And something that makes your emotions agitated, it makes you work more. For example, even coffee or tea, they make your mind move ahead. They make your mind active. They make your body active. That is Rajogun. Then there are also such activities that bring up Rajogun. Running as well, or any type of exercise that we normally do. For example, when we are tired of sitting, we'll normally just make a walk or do some type of exercise. That is Rajogun. Now, this I've said broadly, because if you're not with the perspective of Sattva Gun, you will feel like this all is just, the whole world is only Tamogun and Rajogun. But now bring in the perspective of Sattva Gun. When you bring in the perspective of Sattva Gun, then you realize that Sattva is something that you'll get either in the activity of Rajogun or in the inactivity of Tamogun. It is not something that you can get without activity or without inactivity. Those are the only two things we can do. For example, we can either be seated or we can be moving. Those are the only two alternatives. Sattva Gun is subtle in that way, whereby you can be seated, but you're seated out of bliss. You're just seated, fully attention and fully open to your environment. You're seated and just taking everything in through your senses. Openness there. And you're fully attentive towards something. Naturally, not because of a goal. That will be Sattva Gun. Then when you're walking, you're just walking past in sheer bliss, just peacefully. And I like how the Chinese fight in the Shaolin. Their fighting itself is Sattva Gun. When you just see them fighting, there's this bliss that comes upon you. It's not the fighting with anger, or it is not even the fighting with competition, but it is the fighting with bliss. It is the fighting that comes out of the chi. They call it the chi. It's the fighting that comes out of the life force. How do you move the hands and how do you move the legs when you're in Shaolin? You move them as the chi tells you to move them. It should come out of the life force. It should come out of nature. So in each and every activity, whether you would think it is Tamogun or it is Rajogun, you can bring in the perspective of sattva guna. Because all the activities we know, whether it's sleeping or walking, it can have its own quality, which is tamogun and rajogun, respectively. But it can also have a quality that you bring up, which is sattva-gun. One thing we have known out of this is tamogun and rajogun right now are normal in our lives. There's nothing we need to do to manifest them. Everything in our world right now, the types of food we eat, the activities we do, they encourage the tamogun and they encourage the rajogun. They encourage the activity and they also encourage the passiveness. Because when you're tired of the activity, you will normally go into the passiveness. The sattva gun has to be manifested. It has to be paid attention to for it to manifest. When I say it has to be paid attention to, I don't mean it's something that you make up. It's not something you make up. It's something you should give way for itself to manifest. It's like a seed that has been already put in the soil, but then it's not being watered. It's not being given the right type of soil. It's not being given the right type of climate. When you give sattva gun the right type of climate, the right type of water, then it will sprout out on its own. You just need the right type of environment around you. That would be sattva gun. Now, after having learned how all these manifest, sattva gun on its own, let's see. When we are seated, take an example how, because in the gurukuls, this is how they used to teach sattva gun. Like if you want to have a glimpse of sattva gun first, and then you can go on your own journey on pursuing the sattva gun. So first, being seated, which normally would be tamogun, being steady, and then having all your mind attentive to one thing. You see, you're bringing up the perspective of tamogun, which is being seated, not moving your body at all. And then you bring up the perspective of rajogun, paying attention, utmost attention. When you've done those two, then what the teacher would tell you is now stop paying attention. When you stop paying attention, you also do not sleep. Now you're put in between both phases. You're not allowed to pay attention to anything. You're not allowed to think about anything, which will be rajogun. And then you're also not allowed to sleep when you're seated like this. When that happens, there is that bliss that comes from within, automatic, something that you cannot bring up. All you can do is provide the environment for it to happen within yourself. So when you're in the middle of both, like you do not allow the tamogun to happen, you do not allow the rajogun to happen, then sattva-gun happens on its own. Then another perspective, because this is about manifesting it in sitting. Now manifesting it in action. You do action. Normally it's with an objective. So first, remove the objective. Remove the fruits from there. And do not go back to passiveness. Do not stop working. So you're working without a fruit ahead. You've removed the tamogun part of it. And then you're not going into passiveness. You're removing the tamogun part of it. What will manifest on its own is the bliss of work. It is, you may be doing something repetitively, or you may be doing something that engages your mind, whatever it may be. The main thing is the bliss of mind, the peace of mind that happens in between. That is Sattva Guna.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Yogeshwar. That was amazing summary. I want to now open it up for any questions that anybody has on these three gun. Tamagun, Rajagun, and Sattvagun. Do you understand the difference? If you have any questions, if you want any clarifications, this is the time. Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you'd like to ask any questions. We'll start with Evanik.
Hi, Yogeshwar. Thank you so much. I have one question. So with the gunas, right? The three gunas, one being action, one being laziness. Is there like a judgment of the gunas, like if there's like a good or bad? And is there like a particular guna that brings you towards the center?
Yes. So when you're talking about the gunas in perspective of Adhyatma, in perspective of coming to the center, what Tamogun will do is just lead you away from the center. For example, anger. It will not have you be in your senses. It brings this type of emotion. Anger is a type of emotion that deviates you from everything you're doing. It will even deviate you from your action, from your objectives as well, which you have in the world. That is Tamogun. It will make you deviate away from the center. When you talk about Rajogun, it makes you go round in the peripheral. You'll go in each and every perspective of the peripheral from the perspective of Rajogun, but you will not be able to get to the center. It will take you round and round. And then Sattva Gun is something that pulls you towards the center, because bliss is something that can take you to acceptance. When you do not have bliss in your life, you're always running towards something, or you're just getting pulled back by so much work that you're having. Then you do not have time to think, to contemplate on your own. You do not have the energy that is needed for you to get to the center. What Sattva Gun does is allow the energy to be, allow your attention to be, and just to flow naturally. When I say flow naturally, flowing naturally means it will go back to the center, because the natural state of being is at the center. That is Sattva Gun. It will allow you to go back to the center. But then there is also this, whereby somebody who is in Tamogun, it's Tamogun or Rajogun, it's really easy to realize that I'm doing something wrong. There is a wrong perspective to it, because there is all this, there's the aspect of depression that happens when you're in those two gunas. There's the aspect of laziness that happens, for example, in the world. When somebody is so lazy, we all want to cheer him up. Like, we'll find ways of cheering them up. Like, do something in your life. Don't just stay where you are. And then when somebody is doing so much work, and also tell them, do something that takes your mind away from work. You cannot work 20 hours of the day. That person will also have that aspect of taking his mind away from the work. What happens in Sattva Gun, what they normally give an example of, Tamagun and Rajogun can be chains that bind you, and those chains are of metal. Yes? But what Sattva Gun is, it's a chain that binds you, and it is of gold. Now that chain, normally you'll see that it is of gold. So what you'll take it as is an ornament rather than something that binds you. But as we are going to see, even in chapter 14 or in the subsequent chapters, Even sattva gun will bind you. It will keep you to this body. Even sattva gun, as you're going on the path of this, going towards the center, what it will do is you may get in the middle, you have not yet reached the center, because the peripheral also has these aspects where you're more the peripheral and you're less in the peripheral, but you've not yet reached the center. So when you're on the journey towards the center, there are these aspects of bliss that will come. And then you'll be caught up with the bliss. You want the bliss again and again. In that aspect, when you're caught up with the bliss, you're caught up with the peace that comes, the peace in action, the peace of mind that comes, then you will not reach the center as well. So first thing is to realize that sattva gun is something that takes you towards the center. Another thing to realize is you may also get caught up in that. You may get caught up on the way to getting to the center.
Thank you. Thank you, Yogeshwar. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Rupali. Joe.
So I came in a little late. Thank you, Yogeshwar, as always. So how do these gunas relate to our ego? What's the relationship between our ego and the gunas?
What our ego is something that we bind to so much, like we catch it and we keep it with ourselves. We do not want to let it free. Ego is something that builds up the self. The self as we know it, not that which is said in the Gita as the Atman, but the self as we know in this world. What is the self? Self is something that makes up your identity, whether it is your work, your profession, or it is your emotions, or it is your intellect. That is what we'll say that is who I am. When somebody asks you, who are you? You'll say, I'm a teacher. When somebody asks you, who are you? What you'll say is maybe your name. If somebody asks you, who are you? Then you'll say, I'm an angry person. I'm a loving person. In that perspective, you can see that we, as we are right now, we are clinging to ourselves, what the ego is. We don't have any identity that is separate from the loving person, the angry person, or the person who is always walking, the active person. There is nothing that is different from the gunas as per se right now. What we are is our ego at this point in time. We do not know our Atma. We do not know who we are. All we know is the gunas. Knowing the gunas, knowing something that will deviate you, something that will take you in the peripheral, and something that will take you towards the center. If you can manifest something that can take you towards the center, meaning jnana, which is part of sattva guna, meaning love, that is part of sattva guna, meaning peace, that is part of sattva guna, peace of mind. When you can manifest all this, is when you slowly, you can get to something that is different from your ego, different from yourself as you know right now. And that self is not something that you can get to intellectually, like this is me and this is not me. This is something that you realize, is something that you experience. How these three gunas are part of our ego is we're identifying with the gunas. We're identifying with the peripheral right now. And one thing I would like to say right now is, you see, take the gunas as pointers only. Tamogun is something that is on the peripheral and is pointing out more outside, towards more of the peripheral, like more outside. Rajogun is something that is just moving in circles in the peripheral. And then sattva guna is something that is at the peripheral, yes, but it's just pointing towards the center. It's all part of the peripheral, but it helps us, if it can help us to get somewhere within our spiritual life, then we also accept it.
Thank you. Thank you, Yogeshwar. Next up is Rupali, followed by Alison. Rupali.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to ask, how do those gunas fit in the study of Bhagavad Gita? Like, is it part of chapter 13? Or is it an introduction to chapter 14? And why is it significant to know the gunas as it relates to the study of Bhagavad Gita? So that's my first question. And then my second question is, in, Yogeshwar, you mentioned that when we are arguing with someone or want something from somebody, or are in a conversation or discussion, then if we go with the goal that I want to achieve something, then it's Rajagun. So what would be a way to have a conversation or a negotiation where it is in Sattva Gun and not Tamagun or Rajagun? Thank you.
So the first question about the three gunas and how it relates to the study of Gita. The study of Gita is not only a study of the scripture itself. First thing, the study of Gita is a reflection of life itself. What Gita is something that shows what life is, how it is. It's not something just to read about. It's something that is part of your life already. And what the only thing Gita does is point towards it, allow you to manifest it, allow you to control it. Then the gunas on its own, for example, they are prominent in chapter 14, 17, and 18 in the Bhagavad Gita itself. Why Krishna has also talked about the gunas? It's because it is part of our life. And when something is part of our life, rather than running away from it, understanding it is the point of liberation from it. If you can understand something so well, is only when you can be liberated from it. If you do not understand it to its depth, you'll always just be running away from it while it will be following you from the back. For example, if you want to, certain emotions that we cling to, if we're always running away from the emotion, it will always come back. What we have to do is understand it, understand the cause of it, understand what it results to, understand your state when the emotion is. How do you feel? When you understand the emotion itself, then you understand and you can get liberated from it. And in Indian culture, in Indian scriptures itself, if you understand life itself, you can be liberated from life. If you understand the gunas themselves, then you can be liberated from the gunas. So why we are learning the gunas is not just to indulge within them. It's about understanding them because they're part of our life. There's no part of our life that will be void of all the three gunas. Even though we become sthita prajna at this point in time, the gunas is what will keep us in our body. If the gunas are not there, even in a small amount, then we shall just leave the body at that point in time. So the gunas is what keeps us in our body. Even though a person is sthit prajna, has realized samadhi, that person has gunas within himself. If you have something within yourself, then If you understand it, you're liberated from it. If you do not understand it and carried away by it, or you're running away from it, then you'll never be liberated from it. Now, the second question that you asked about how in a conversation, do not go to Rajoguna, meaning desiring something out of that person, or not going to Tamoguna, meaning getting angry with that person, or just becoming passive in the conversation, not remaining active. That will be Tamoguna. First of all, have a conversation with somebody, because if you stop having a conversation with somebody, you'll not realize that these gunas are coming. So continue having conversations with people. So that's the first thing to do. Then, while you're having conversations with people, remove the desires from the conversation. Remove anything that will bring up the future in the conversation. Stay in the present, whereby staying in the present means talk about things that bring up knowledge. Talk about things that are about life per se, understanding life. And talk about things that are part of peace and bliss. And then also do not go passive in the conversation. Do not stop having conversations. And do not also just stay quiet. So have a conversation, do not have a desire, and do not become passive. This is not something that will manifest in one conversation, in two conversations. It's something, just keep notice. There's something unique to the gunas. When you keep notice of the gunas, you'll realize that you get liberated from them. Like you can manipulate the gunas as per your control. When you just by looking at them, just by realizing that they're there. So realize that Rajogun is there, realize Tamogun is there. Then slowly remove the Rajogun and the Tamogun. What will manifest will be the Sattvagun.
Wonderful. Thank you. Rupali, that were beautiful questions. Now, I don't know this topic as well as Yogeshwar does, but I'm going to try to give you as best as I understand it. So first question was, why are we studying gunas? And I think Yogeshwar put it beautifully. If you look at the diagram, there is the center and there is a periphery. What gunas is describing is three movements, three fundamental movements that are possible to us. Either you can go away from the center, and you can go, looks like you can go away from the center in two ways. One is kind of aggressively saying no to it in case of anger. And secondly, kind of giving up on it and drifting away from it through laziness or wanting to just shut off your consciousness all the time. So that movement is away from the center. So let me go ahead and let me see if I can just do the whiteboard. So, you have the center. Sorry, I can't draw as well with my mouse here. This is a center, this is a periphery. Let me see if I can change the color. No, that's fine. So there are three directions. You are here. There are three directions possible. You can go this way, and that is Tamagun. You can go this way. It's in this direction, but you're actually going round and round like this along the periphery. That is the Rajagun. You're a creature of habit. You're pursuing actions, but those are mostly reactive to whatever values that you have. Or you can move in this direction. That is the Sattva Gun. So those are the three things. And the reason that Gita focuses on it is that these are the three directions that we can do, we can move in. at all times. And we are living beings, we are moving beings. So this is ever present in us. And that's why we are looking at it, that these are the three potential directions, so that you can be aware of which direction you're moving. And also the second question was amazing. The question is, how do you do this in a conversation? So again, Yogeshwar had a wonderful answer. So one is that suppose you shut yourself off to the other person. You're basically saying no to their existence and you just are not engaging with them. Or you're angry about them and you're simply saying no to them. That's one possibility. The second possibility is that you can deal with them in the normal course with whatever values that you have. And that is Rajagun, that you're basically engaging in life as normal. So then what is Sattvagun? So firstly, again, the great observation that Yogeshwar made was that the Tamagun and Rajagun is very easy to understand. If you're living normally, like that he says, today's world is Raja Pradhan. That means it is dominantly Raja. That means that's people are pursuing different values in the periphery. That's what most of us are doing. So that's what most of the human interaction is. So what then is Sattva? And as Yogeshwar is saying, it is difficult to actually grasp what Sattva is and what Sattva is in a given context. But the important thing to realize is that that is possible in every context. All three gunas are possible in every context. And Sattva is difficult to figure out. So what is Sattva in human interaction? And I think the simplest way I can put it is the namaste, which is what you're saying is that the God in me greets the God in you. So if you're focused on the core of their being, that is the element of you exercising Sattva Gun in an interaction. Because what that does is that you're simply saying yes to the core of their being. You're saying yes to the center of their being. And that is a very different perspective than how most people deal with each other. And then Sattva Gun doesn't mean that you just do that. You can be talking. You can be silent with this. You can be talking with this. You can be working with them with this. So again, as Yogeshwar is saying, Sattva applies to a whole bunch of, just like sleep can be in all three gunas. A regular conversation, a hello can be in all three gunas. So that's how I understand it. Yogeshwar, please go ahead and tell me what you think.
Yes. So there was one thing that popped up in my mind while you're bringing all this up is one experience that we must all have had is maybe at one point in time when we're just talking to a person that we have fallen in love with, yes, or a friend, and then we're just talking. It's not that we're not talking. We're not passive at that point. And then we're just talking to them just for the sake of talking. Like we're not talking to them to get something out of them or because we want a desire out of them, but we're talking out of love. We're talking because of this bliss that both of us are getting from it. So that is how I would say Sattva Gun looks like in something that we must have captured at one point in time, at least in our lives.
Wonderful, excellent example. Yogeshwar, I want to ask you one question. The first time I looked at the description of Tamagun, the thing that I found most surprising is that the Gita talks about three aspects of it: laziness, sleepiness, and anger. Now, laziness and sleepiness, the commonality of that was very obvious to me. But I said anger, that seems to be quite different from these two. So what is it that is common to anger on one hand and these other two things?
Shrikant,
Huh?
you're back.
Yes, I'm back. I'm back.
You were gone for a while there.
Okay. Okay, I'm back. Go ahead, Yogeshwar. I don't know whether I don't know if you heard the question.
No, we didn't hear anything.
Okay. Sorry about that. So Yogeshwar, my question was, when I read the description of Tamagun for the first time, I saw there are three different things: laziness, sleepiness, and anger. Immediately I said laziness and sleepiness, I can see the commonality, similarity between them. Because laziness is being kind of sleepy when you are awake, and sleepiness is the other way around. So I can see the commonalities. But I said, okay, wait, why is anger being put in the same category as these? So what is it that is common to anger on one hand, and then laziness and sleepiness on the other?
So how we are looking at the gunas is from the outside. But look at the gunas from the within. How would like to normally put anger is anger makes us do an action. Rather, these two, they keep us from doing any action. We see anger as part of action. That's how we normally look at it from the outside. Now look at it from the inside. How do you feel when you're lazy? How do you feel when you're sleepy? And how do you feel when you're angry? There is this sadness that comes upon you. Like in your emotions, how these gunas have been laid out is it's best upon your emotions and your being. What happens in laziness and sleeping as a part of your emotions and your being is the same thing that happens when you're angry. For example, everything, like all your desires, they're scattered out. Like when you're, for example, let's take a very simple example. We're having a conversation and somebody becomes passive, or their attention is scattered out. That would say is tamogun, and we all realize that. For example, when we begin yawning in the conversation, or when we are not paying attention, our attention is scattered out. At that time, we realize that we're feeling sleepy, and now our attention is being scattered. That's why it's tamogun. What happens in anger is your attention is not focused in one point, it's all scattered. That is the main focus of the guna. When you're sleepy, we would feel that our attention is in one place. No, that's not the case. When you're sleepy, you realize that you have dreams, and those dreams are all attention scattered. And while your attention is scattered, you cannot have a dream for a long time. You realize that a dream is only like barely a minute. You may have done so much in the dream, but it's barely a minute. It's because your attention was scattered everywhere. Is why we call it tamoguna. Tamoguna meaning you're not attentive in one place. That's why we're putting anger in tamoguna.
Wonderful. What is the actual meaning of the word tama in Sanskrit?
When we are going in the words themselves, so tama meaning andhakar, meaning darkness. That is tama. The color put to tamagun is black. Like there is a normal shlok in the Upanishads. Ajam ekam lohita shukla krishna. Lohita meaning red, shukla meaning white, and krishnam meaning black. and black meaning tamogun. Then red is put to rajogun, and rajogun is brought from the same root that raga comes out. Raga meaning desire. Tamogun, rajogun in that aspect, in that perspective, is given the color red because it makes you do work, like it's always active in that condition. Then sattva gun, sat meaning being, and being meaning nature. So sattva, normally if like in Hindi, manushya is a person, and then manushyatva is the quality within the person. So sat is being, and sattva is the quality of being. So sattva gun means that which is of your own nature. That's the meaning. Those are the meanings of the words themselves.
Wonderful. Thank you. Again, I like the parallels, in Tamagun, you're turning your back on the light. So you can imagine the light in the center, the light of truth in the center. And you're basically turning your back on it deliberately or through your inattention. That when you're going round and round, you're expending all this energy, all this emotion, charge for action, and you're pointed that way. There is light falling on you, but you're not really orienting towards the light. You're going, at perpendicular to the light. Whereas sattva is the light, so you're focused and moving directly towards light. Wonderful. Next up is Allison.
Yeah, I kind of want to check to see if I'm understanding this correctly. I was thinking that Raja is kind of like ADHD, where you're so like spinning to the point and so active to the point that you can't actually accomplish anything. And that, I know I'm not pronouncing these right, but tamaguna is more like you're so inactive, you're so lazy, you're so sleepy that you're not accomplishing anything. So you've got these two extremes, and that sattva is like the middle way, kind of like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, where this porridge is too hot and this porridge is too cold, and that you need to be in the middle, and that's the only way that you really can actually accomplish anything, is it's somewhere in the middle. Is that what sattva is like, or no?
I don't think so, but I'll have Yogeshwar respond.
Okay.
Yes. So one thing that we need to realize about tamogun and rajogun, the distinction to be made there is that if you're in the influence of alcohol, I can say, because I'm not really familiar with the other drugs, but when you're in the influence of alcohol, that is tamogun. That is tamogun in the way that it stops you from sensing what you're supposed to sense. It reduces your mind's capacity. And by that value, it is tamogun. Because tamogun is anything that reduces your mind's capacity. That's why laziness, sleepiness, and anger are put in that category. And that's why even things like alcohol, being under the influence of alcohol, are put in that category. Rajogun, on the other hand, would be something that makes you active. Something like caffeine, like not like probably if you say coffee and tea, those make up the rajogun. Like they make you, like they can allow you to work more hours of the day. That is something that is rajogun, something that keeps you active. It keeps your senses active. It keeps your mind's capacity active. That is what rajogun is. And sattva gun is whether you're active or inactive, you're at peace. Being at peace, being in bliss, and being in this condition whereby you have the utmost knowledge and you are at peace, meaning your mind is not only dwelling on its own. And then there are also two perspectives of rajogun and tamogun. For example, when we are looking only on the perspective of the body, like outwardly, sitting means tamogun, and walking means rajogun. But when you're talking about the mind now, you can be sitting and you have all these thoughts in the mind. So in the perspective of the mind, that is rajogun, when you're having all these thoughts in your mind. And then you can't be walking, but then you have no thoughts in your mind. Like, for example, when you go to have a morning walk, you're clear of thoughts. Yes? That is something that is not rajogun now in that state. So not only talking about these states as per maybe sitting or sleeping or walking, but then it is more inside now. What is your mental capacity of doing anything? Is your mental capacity increased or is it deprived? So when it is deprived of itself, that is tamogun. When your mental capacity is increased, that is rajogun, like you're more active, you can do more action. When you're at bliss, however you are, that is sattvagun. Like when you're having the morning walk and there are no thoughts in your mind, you're just normal. That is like bliss. You're coming upon this shanti, this peace that is within your mind. So even though there is something about walking that is there, which you may think is rajogun, but if there are no thoughts in your mind and you're just allowing the nature to be, you're allowing the breeze to come inside, that will be sattvagun.
Wonderful. Let me add something, because this is very important to get this right. Let me see what's happened here. Got into this. Let me try it again. I'm going to try to bring up the whiteboard. And let's see if it works. Okay. So, so Alison, both examples that you gave of somebody who is lazy and ADHD, both of them are examples of tamagun. So sattvagun is exactly opposite that. So rajagun is when is what most people are doing most of the time. Most good people are doing most of the time. They're actually building things, they're working things, they are pursuing their values, they're going about their business, they're very effective at doing it. All of that is rajagun. So that is in this direction, So this is tamagun, which interestingly has, both anger in it, where you're saying no aggressively to the center, or you are kind of closing your eyes, yawning and going away from the center. But it's all movement away from the center. Here in rajagun, you are actually pursuing your life in the periphery. The sattva gun is in a direction which is different from both these. There is when you're focused on your core. Any glimpses that you have of your core, you say, okay, this is what really matters. This is what really matters. This is who I am. Any glimpses of that. That is very different. It's exactly opposite of saying no to the center or yawning at it. And it is perpendicular to the action of being engaged with periphery, because you are pointed at inward towards the core of your being. So that is the distinction. All right. Can we let's go ahead and read from 1 to 8. As our regular readers are not there, I'm going to read, and I want to take the opportunity of reading from Sri Aurobindo, which is definitely my favorite translation. So this is going to be this is chapter 14. We're going to read from 1 to 8. The Blessed Lord said, I will again declare the supreme knowledge, the highest of all knowings, which, having known all the sages, have gone hence to the highest perfection. Having taken refuge in this knowledge and become of like nature and law of being with me, they are not born in the creation nor troubled by the anguish of the universal dissolution. My womb is the Mahat Brahman. Into that I cast the seed. Thence spring all beings, O Bharata. Whatever forms are produced in whatever wombs, O Kaunteya, the Mahat Brahman is their womb, and I am the Father who casts the seed. The three gunas born of Prakruti, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, bind in the body, O great armed one, the imperishable dweller in the body. Of these, Sattva is by the purity of its quality a cause of light and illumination, and by the virtue of that purity produces no disease or morbidity or suffering in the nature. It binds by attachment to knowledge and attachment to happiness. Rajas, know thou, has for its essence attraction of liking and longing. It is a child of attachment of the soul to the desire of objects. It binds the embodied spirit by attachment to works. But Tamas, know thou, born of ignorance, is the deluder of all embodied beings. It binds by negligence, indolence, and sleep. Yogeshwar.
अथ चतुर्दशोऽध्यायः श्रीभगवानुवाच परं भूयः प्रवक्ष्यामि ज्ञानानां ज्ञानमुत्तमम् यज्ञात्वा मुनयः सर्वे परां सिद्धिमितो गताः. Here Krishna is telling Arjuna, again I am telling you, this particular type of knowledge, it's just not knowledge, but it is knowledge of all the knowledge. It is the essence of all knowledge. After knowing which, all those who have attained some adhyatma, all those who have attained, gotten to the center, only after knowing this knowledge is when you can get to the center. Without knowing all this knowledge, you can't get to the center. And Krishna continues that idam jnanam upashritya mama sadharnyamagataha sarge pinopajhayante pralayena vyatanti cha. As we've already discussed, it's when you know everything about the peripheral is when you can be like away from that bind that it puts onto you. You're not bound by it if you know it. If you want to be liberated from something, understand it to the fullest. Understand it to its depth. That is when you can be liberated from it. Having known all this knowledge, what happens to them? Mama sadharmya magata. They get to the state of being that I am in. They get one with me. Sargepi nopajhayante. Pralaye na vyathanti cha. When time of creation comes, they do not take birth. When time of destruction comes, they never die. One perspective we normally that this verse is put into is the perspective of you get liberated from this world, like you're out of this world. But another perspective that I would also like to put to this is, you may be in this body, yes, but even though you're in this body, when death comes, you do not die. When birth comes, you're not born, because you are not what is born or what dies. You are separate from it. When Krishna was born, he was not born. And when he died, he didn't die. There was that which was not born and which did not die, which was Krishna. When Krishna says, Mama sadharme magata, Krishna means that. That after attaining, if you attain that, if you become one with me, if you get to know that which does not die and that which is not born, by virtue, yourself you become that which is not born or that which does not die. It's not about being liberated in a way that, oh, you do not have to take birth another time. Maybe, we do not know about it. But for sure, one thing that will happen is that in this body, however much activity you do, you're never bound by it. Even though death comes, you do not die, because you are something that is Atman, that is Brahman. You're not the body itself. And what dies is the body. Mama yonir mahad brahma tasmin garbham dadhamyaham sambhava sarva bhutanam tato bhavati bharata sarvayonishu kaunteya murtaya sambhavanti yaha tasam brahma mahadyonir aham bija pradah pita. Krishna here is giving an example that take it to be. I am the father of everything. I'm the father of all creation. And take Brahma, who is Mahadyoni, meaning the example given here is the womb, where the father puts the seeds. Another example we can also give is the whole world, like the soil itself, let's say, is the womb for any seed. The farmer is the father, and the farmer will decide where to put the seed, in which type of soil the seed will be able to flourish on its own. What Brahma does, what Mahadyonir does, what the soil does is just allow the conditions, is just allow the creation to be. Everything comes out of Mahadyonir. Everything comes out of the manifest. This is like saying, now this is just an example. It's not what actually happens per se. Metaphorically, what happens is the unmanifest is just there. There is no action in the unmanifest. There's nothing the unmanifest does. All the action that happens is in the manifest. Now take the manifest as the Mahadyoni, all that we can see. All the action, all the creation happens in the manifest. The unmanifest is just the unseen Father, is the unseen mover of everything. He is the one who, in essence, creates everything through the manifest. He is the one who is shown through the manifest. But when anything is shown through the manifest, it is not him who is shown. It is the manifest which is manifesting itself. It's something that's just coming out of the manifest, nothing else. So, Mama Yonir Mahad Brahma, Tasmin Garbham Dadhamyaham. There is a womb or fertile soil that is there, and that is Mahad Brahma. In that, I sow my seeds, which is the unmanifest seeds. For example, us. Let's take an example of this, or an example of a tree. The manifest, a seed itself. When you cut the seed, do you see anything inside? Like, do you see the mango tree inside, within the seed? No, there's nothing. Do you see that which fertilizes? Do you see that which grows into the tree? No, you do not. But there is something in the middle that is unseen, yet it is that which grows. So normally, that which is the unmanifest is inside the seed. Yes. What we'll normally think is that the seed is what grows. So that's what Krishna is saying. Mama yonir mahad brahma. That manifest is what becomes the manifest, which is the tree now. In which I manifest myself. It is the unmanifest that is saying, I manifest myself. Sambhava sarva bhutanam tato bhavati bharata. It is from which all creation happens. It is from the manifest that all the creation happens. Sarva yonishu kaunteya murtaya sambhavantiya. All the different types of forms that you're seeing that are created, those are all forms that tasam brahma mahad yoni. Of all those forms, the fertile soil or the womb is Brahma. The fertile soil is the manifest. And I, who is the unmanifest, is the one who sows the seeds in the fertile soil. In that perspective, you can see that life itself, or the prana, the life itself is unmanifest. It cannot be seen. But that life is what can be able to give another life. Life is what can give another life. It's not that something like the soil itself, bare on its own, can give life. Something that doesn't have life cannot give life. So that means there's something that is unmanifest within ourselves. It must have come from something that is unmanifest, which is the unmanifest itself, the unmanifest that runs the whole world. Sattvam rajastama iti gunaha prakruti sambhavaha nibadnanti mahabaho dehe dehi namavyayam. There are three qualities of Prakruti. There are three qualities of the manifest. And they come out of the manifest. Without these three qualities, there would be no manifest. What do these three qualities do? Nibadnanti mahabaho dehe dehi namavyayam. Those three qualities for eternity, they bind the Atman, they bind the Dehi to the Deha. They bind the one who knows, the Kshetragya, to the Kshetra. They bind the Atman to the body. They bind the center to the peripheral. They bind the unmanifest to the manifest. Without that bound in between, there will be no creation. And Krishna here is saying that these three gunas as they are, if it would only be unmanifest, these three gunas would not be there. It's because the unmanifest becomes manifest is when you see these three gunas. It is when we do any activity is when these three gunas are shown. When I say doing any activity, I mean even sleeping is an activity that we do. And even being lazy is an activity that we do. So all these three gunas are shown in our life from start to end. And we are bound to those three gunas if we're in this body. Dehe dehinamavyaya. They bound he who is the owner of this body, he who controls the body to the body. Tatra sattvam nirmalatvat prakashakamanayam sukha sangena badnati dhyana sangena janaga. Sattva, what is it? Nirmala, meaning pure. It has the essence of purity within itself. Prakashakam, it is full of radiance, it's full of light. Because of these qualities, also the Atman will cling to it. Now, Krishna here has started, because all we have discussed so far is the normal being of the gunas, that the Sattva gun takes you towards the center. But Krishna is also adding an element to the Sattva guna. That Sattva guna itself also binds you. How will it bind you? It will bind you with the bliss. It will bind you with the happiness. And it will also bind you by the knowledge. It will bind you by the essence of its light. It will bind you by its purity. How we would talk about it in the yoga tradition is you may get to a level of samadhi, which in the Yoga Sutras is called sampragyata samadhi. You've not gone out or beyond your thoughts. You're within your thoughts. But there's this state of bliss that comes upon. Even within the thoughts, there are those thoughts that lead you towards bliss, towards happiness, rather than rajogun, atamogun. And those thoughts is what happens in sampragyata samadhi. You're in this state of samadhi, but it also binds you. And in the Yoga Sutras, it's written that you should be able to go beyond the sampragyata samadhi. Going beyond the normal states of being is easier. It's like the chains of metal that we know. And we always want to get rid of those chains. But now the chain of gold, it will now start seeming like an ornament. It will start seeming like it gives me my being. It gives me who I am. And if you're still stuck to the sattva gun, if you're still stuck to the light, then it's still clinging to something that you are not. Rajo ragatmakam vidhi trishna sanga samudbhavam tannibadnati kaunteya karma sangena dehinam. What is Raja? Ragatmakam. It is made of desires. And the main root, Raja, is the same root that is used in Raga. And it is the same root used in Ranga. Ranga meaning color. Any color that is there in the world. If it is not white and it is not black, it is all the other mixed colors, whether it is red, blue, green, everything else. Because those are the colors that take you to activity. Those are the colors that take you towards doing anything in the world, towards achieving something. Trishna Sanga Samudbhavam. Trishna meaning desires that have taken are taken to the extreme. Those sort of desires are what is called Trishna. And normally Trishna, like in normal Sanskrit, is translated to thirst. Yes. But then, it's like you may drink water, that's fine. But when you drink water when you're thirsty, there's a different way of drinking water. You'll drink water like you've never drunk water. So in that way, normal raga, normal desire is something that we know. But then going towards desire to an extreme level is what Trishna is here. Sangha, meaning attachment. So how Raja Gun is manifested is through the thirst of desire, that extreme of desire, and the attachment to anything. That is also Rajogun. Tannibadnati kaunteya karma sangena dehina. How does it make someone attached to the body? How does it attach to yourself? It is karma sangena. Through action is how you get attached. Normally, when we're doing action, we even forget ourselves. We feel that the action is what we are. It feels like the movement is what we are. We feel that there's no stopping now. When we're doing some work that we're so much indulged into, and we have a deadline, let's say, because that's a desire to fulfill, we have a deadline or an objective to meet. We dive so much into the work, we forget ourselves. That is Rajogun, because you want to meet a deadline. You want to meet that objective. Tamastvagyanajam vidhi mohanam sarvadehinam pramadalasya nidrabhis tannibadnati bharata. What is tama? First thing is agyanajam, something that takes you towards ignorance. Anything and everything that takes you towards ignorance is tamogun. Mohanam sarvadehinam. Another aspect of tamogun is moha. Moha meaning a state of emotion whereby you do not know what to do. Your mind is totally in that state whereby you're confused. Your whole thought process is scattered out. You cannot figure out that this is what I want to do or this is what I do not want to do. You're deluded by your imaginations. You're deluded by your emotions as well. Normally would want to think that as Rajogun because it's part of activity. But Krishna here is saying no. Since it takes you towards ignorance, it takes you towards saying no to the light that is coming from the center. You're drifting away from the center. That is tamogun. Any type of ignorance that takes you away from the center, even though it's anger. When you're angry, you do not have a perspective. You're deluded. You do not have one goal to reach. Because if you have one goal to reach, that will be Rajogun. You're not also at peace, which would be Sattvagun. What you are is you have scattered thoughts all through. And it is bringing up ignorance, whereby your senses are not being able to contemplate what is true and what is false. Your mind and your thought process is not being able to contemplate what is true and what is untrue. What is the truth and what is false. That ignorance is what is tamogun. Pramadalasya nidrabhis tannibadnati bharata. How does it bind you? How does it bring its attachment to you? It is through pramada. Pramada meaning you have an activity to do. but now you're running away from that activity. There's something that you have to do. Now running away from that activity and saying, giving excuses now that, oh, I can't do that activity because maybe I'm doing something else. Yet you know that that something else is just your excuse of not doing the activity. That is pramada, running away from your dharma, running away from your sabhava. Alasya, meaning you're lazy. You're just seated in the couch, you have nothing to do. So you're scrolling all the television channels all through. There is no perfect goal that you're meeting at that point. Nidra, meaning sleep. When you're in that point of sleep, when we're, there is no movement in that sleep. It's just tamo pradhan. When all the activity has come to rest, that is tamo. And would normally think that, does tamogun bind? Yes, it does bind. Somebody will feel like sleeping all day long. Somebody will feel like not doing the work that he's supposed to do, running away from work. And he also feels attachment to it, whereby he even tells his friend, oh yes, you remember this time where I was able to make an excuse towards my boss why I didn't do the work. You're also having a flavor in it. You're getting the taste of it. And when you're getting a taste of it, you're getting attached to it. When you're making excuses, you're getting attached to it. When you're just resting, and now when you're resting, you'll also say, oh yes, I'm just, passing time. Or I've been loaded with work the whole day. Now I need something to rest upon. That is tamogun. You will be bound by it as well.
Thank you, Yogeshwar. Folks, it's time for questions. I have a couple of questions. Firstly, Yogeshwar, can you talk about the roots of the word pramad?
So, pramada. Mother is gotten from the root of mother. Mother, meaning if you have seen somebody who is full of himself, first thing, that is mother. Now, how it translates to pramada is in the way that you become full of yourself in a way that you do not do the activity that is supposed to be done. When you're able to run away from the activity, when you're able to make an excuse from that activity, it will be called pramada.
Wonderful, thank you. Folks, go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you would like to ask questions. Next question was, I was really struck by the word bind in the number 5, that the unmanifest is bound to Prakruti through these gunas. Can you talk a little bit more about this word bind?
So, one thing about bind we need to know, it's the same thing as a boundary, let's say. A boundary is something that separates. It's something where you can make a distinction that this is this and this is this. A boundary is also something that joins both of them. Whether it is 2 cities or 2 countries, that boundary joins them. Joining them in a way, that is the point of interaction. So it is a separation point and it is a joining point as well. Here, how Krishna has put nibadnanti, meaning binding, it is a joining point between them, whereby it is how the unmanifest shows its manifest form. It is the joining point between the manifest and the unmanifest. we would take it normally like that, the joining point. But then normally how now that definition is put into context is, it is a point of attachment that you should go away from it. But what I feel Krishna is saying here is something that is true, not something that you have to be unbound by it, but know it, know that boundary exists. It's not that you have to remove the boundary, because that boundary can never be removed. If that boundary is removed, all the manifest in this world will fall down. So let the boundary be, but let yourself know and understand that it is because of that joining, it's because of that boundary that the unmanifest is being able to manifest itself. So in that way, know it as a positive thing rather than a negative thing.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else has any questions? Go ahead and type exclamation mark. We're going to start with, give me just a second. Let me unmute everybody. Okay, go ahead, Brian.
So actually, your last answer anticipated my first question, which is, this dynamic you're describing is neither good nor bad. It didn't sound like it was that there was a judgment there. The second question, that's my takeaway from your answer. The second question is this binding that you talk about, and Shrikant used the correct Indian word, the binding, the thing that binds and separates. It sounds a lot like the glass that you were talking about with the Purusha last time. Is this the same thing, or the same dynamic, the same concept? Or is it a different context that we're talking?
So yes, that concept of the glass is what, because it's the glass which will be tainted with these three gunas. It's through which you'll see the whole world. It's through which the whole world will manifest. And that's how it is talked about. Yeah, so that's true. The glass example is true. And not having a judgment towards the gunas, or not having a judgment towards the Prakruti and the Purusha, is that state when you're not bound by it. Because normally when you're bound by it, you'll always have a judgment. When you're taken away by anger, after you're getting out of anger, you'll say, I should not have become angry. When you're so much into activity, and then there's a point whereby you get depressed, or you get so much involved in work, you have no time to rest, then you also have that point in time whereby I should not have done this. I should not have gone into so much work. I should have rested as well. So when you're into, or when you're indulged into one of the gunas so much, is when you have a judgment about the gunas. When you separate yourself from the gunas, when you know that I am separate from the gunas, and they may be tools to help me in this world, but I am totally different from them, is when you can remove that judgment that you always put towards the gunas.
Thank you.
Wonderful. If anybody has questions, go ahead. I'm going to read one, the number 5 again, about this binding, and read Sri Aurobindo's commentary on the word bind. The three gunas born of Prakruti, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, bind in the body, the imperishable dweller in the body. So this is his description of the word, his commentary on the word bind. It is a subordinate act or a state of consciousness. It is a self-oblivious identification with the modes of nature in the limited working of this lower motivity And with this self-wrapped, ego-bound knot of action of the mind, life, and body that gets the soul into the appearance of birth and death and bondage. To rise above the three modes of nature is indispensable if we are to get back into our fully conscious being, away from the obsessing power of the lower action, and to put on the free nature of the spirit and its eternal immortality. That condition of the Swadharma is what Gita next proceeds to develop. Right? Anybody else has any questions or comments? Let me read one more thing on binds. So this is really a point that I was very curious about. This is about sattva. So what Gita is saying is sattva also binds. So what is the meaning of sattva binding? So that's what we'll come to next, but I'm going to start with, I'm going to go with, okay, all right. Bye, Yogeshwar. I'm going to go ahead and read this one, and then we'll go to Marco. All right. So this is the question of how sattva binds. Okay, so this is verse 6. Of these, sattva is by purity of its quality a cause of light and illumination, and by the virtue of that purity produces no disease or morbidity or suffering in the nature. It binds by attachment to knowledge, attachment to happiness. So here Sri Aurobindo is describing how sattva binds, how sattva also binds. Sattva binds as much as the other gunas and binds just in the same way by desire, by ego. A nobler desire, purer ego, but so long as in any form these two hold the being, there is no freedom. The man of virtue, of knowledge, has his ego of the virtuous man, his ego of knowledge. And it is that sattvic ego which he seeks to satisfy. For his own sake, he seeks virtue and knowledge. Only when we seek to satisfy the ego, to think and to will from the ego, the limited I in us, then is there real freedom. In other words, freedom, highest self-mastery, begins when above the natural self, we see and hold the supreme self, of which the ego is an obstructing veil and blinding shadow. And that can only be seen, and that can only be when we see the one self in us seated above nature and make our individual being one with it in being and consciousness and in its individual nature of action, only an instrument of a supreme will, the one will that is really free. For that, we must rise high above the three gunas. Okay. So now comments or questions. We're going to start with Marco, followed by Joe. Marco.
Yeah, I think Yogeshwar said something about like being stuck to the light. I was just wondering, like, yeah, like if he could like expound on that.
Sure, sure. That is a very difficult concept, and which is what the passage that I read about was. What Gita seems to be saying. Now, my ability to answer these questions is nowhere as near Yogeshwar. He knows this material much better than I do. But as I understand it, what happens is that you're moving towards the center. So sattva is the direction towards the center. Now, when you move towards the center, you have more light, you have more bliss, you have all kinds of good things that are happening to you, which are the result of your movement towards the center. But just like you can get attached to other things, you can get attached to that bliss that you're feeling, or the knowledge of the center that you're getting. And you identify yourself with that feeling of bliss or knowledge that you have. Now, the moment you do that, you are placing yourself apart from the center. So let me see if I can bring up the diagram again. Okay, so you see the diagram here. So what it is saying is that the movement towards the sattva is this way, towards the center. But let's say that you got here. Okay, you moved towards the center and got here. And you got attached to the fact that you are not here, but here. You attached your ego to that. Then what happens is that it's actually effectively, you are at a different state in the periphery. You're still not at the center. You got attached to the products of your movement towards the center, the bliss, the knowledge. And that binds you and keeps you away from the center. That's what it means. Next up is Joe.
You actually captured most of what I was kind of trying to get to with this, the idea. I'm going to say it incorrectly as well. Sativa.
Sattva.
Sattva. Thank you for that. And how that it can be binding as well as the pursuit of knowledge. And the thing I'm getting with the three gunas more than anything is the importance of balance that it needs to be struck with all of them in order to actually to not be too attached to certain things that they like knowledge or the things that can actually take us away from the center. That's just some thoughts that I had, but it's kind of general, but I'm still wrapping my head around the concept itself.
Yeah, thank you. I as best as I understand it, this is not about balance. This is about just being at the center. So you're either at the center or you're not at the center. All these three things are kind of movements. These are movements of the Prakruti. So these are kind of various things that the form can be doing. But this is not the center itself. So it is all focused when this entire discussion of gunas is saying you can be moving in these three directions. As a creature, that's a nature. That's the nature of being part of a being, living being. And what it is pointing to, like the Sri Aurobindo commentary talks about, is it's saying that center is something different. Don't forget that. Even when you're moving towards the center in Sattva Gun, realize that your motion itself is not the center. You're trying to get to the center. So that is how it's a very difficult concept, and hopefully, over time we will clarify it. It's a profound idea of these gunas, and I want to, we want to take time to go through it. I don't know, Joe, if that answers the question or addresses the question.
It helps me.
Okay.
It helps me understand exactly. I mean, because I was thinking about it incorrectly, and it is going to take some time to understand the inner workings of these. This seems to be one of the more challenging concepts that we've kind of come across. Chapter 13 was the deepest, but this seems a little bit more complex.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Anybody else? How was today's discussion? Is it do you think that you get this distinction between tamas, rajas, and sattva, or is it difficult? Or if you want to put it in your own words, you can describe it in your own words. We'll start with Evanik, followed by Brian. Evanik.
I think I get it on a very high level. I get the concept of it. In that, let me look at my notes. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the names. So the one guna is talking about laziness and anger, and the other one is talking about action and work, and the third one is about finding your bliss and bring you more towards the center. So I think it's kind of like each one of these in their extremes can bring you away from the center, in that, yes, you need rest. So if you're looking at the one that talks about laziness, you do need rest, right? So you need rest in order to rejuvenate, but that can go extreme, and that's a guna, right? So that one can go totally to the extreme and take you away from the center, and it's to a point where you're just not being productive. The action one has the opposite effect, right? You go too far, you work so hard, you, like your guests were saying, you need to rest. People are telling you you need to rest, relax, and enjoy, in a sense, enjoy the fruits of your labor. Like if you're just working, you never get to enjoy the results of that. Not to say to be attached, but and then for sattva, did I say that right?
Yes.
For sattva, it can bring you towards the center, but you can be focused on the form rather than the center, and you're chasing bliss rather than trying to get to the center. Like you're looking for the effect of it rather than the actual purpose. So that's my understanding of it.
Wonderful. I think you've gotten the heart of it. I think that's how I understand it too. Thank you. Brian.
I think I understand the distinction between the three. What Evanik said, resonated with me, and as he was talking through it, initially I felt like I was understanding something. I wish I'd asked he said it's like the chi or the sattva. And now I forgot, but the sattva is like the chi and the Chinese. And I wanted to ask, is it like the Tao? And that would have helped me understand the context better, I think. Maybe you have a thought on that, because I think I understand the distinction of the three, but how the three fits into the bigger picture, I don't really get that. So it helped me to know, is this like are the gunas like the Tao, especially the sattva, is that like nature or the way of nature and Tao?
Okay, excellent question. So what I would say, what Yogeshwar is saying, what I think Yogeshwar is saying is the Tao is the center. Wu Wei is sattvic action. Wu Wei is sattvic action. So what he was describing is that when you're moving towards the center, inspired by the center, letting the Tao operate in you, that is sattvic action. So the translation would be Wu Wei. Wu Wei is sattvic action. You're acting without acting, in the sense that you're acting from that, you're letting Tao act through you. You're not attached to the actions. You're letting Tao act from you. So that's how I see mapping. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. So I want to tell you what I want to do at the end is I want to give you a preview of what Brian and Evanique are about to start. I'm very excited about this. I've been waiting for it for a while. And finally, on July 10th, begins a new monthly series. And it's going to be called The Divine Feminine. So Evanique and Brian, if you could talk a little bit, give a little bit of preview of what to expect. It's going to be once a month, and it's a humongous topic. And I am excited about it because all the three traditions that we are studying actually are male dominated in some way, at a very deep level. Whereas the older religions, many of the older religions are, have divine feminine in it as a much larger part than the divine masculine. So I'm really excited about this. I think it's going to provide really interesting things. So with that introduction, let me, if you could, Brian and Evanique, if you could just talk a little bit about what you're planning to do.
Brian, do you want to go first, or?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. It is, I would say it's vast and amorphous. It's also lurking in really everything. I find that since I've started reading and thinking about it and been more sensitive to it, I find it's lurking in everything we talk about. And our initial approach, we need to talk again, I think, to flesh it out, but to give some kind of thread to this for discussion is to base it on the book Goddess Power. I think that was based on the last time we talked, and I've read other books, but I don't think that's really changed.
Let me request one thing. Evanique, if you could put a link to that book in the chat, that will be fantastic. Go ahead, Brian. Sorry about the interruption.
So again, it is a very amorphous, vast, and all-pervasive topic. So we need to pick a thread, and really, I think at some point there's just a selection, more or less arbitrary, to start. But I think that this one is not trying to make a particular point; is just trying to open the door for insight and discussion. So I think that it is a very good book. For example, what you illustrated, that the historical approach is one way to look at it. The theological or mythological approaches are different ways. The psychological approach is different. There's so many different ways to approach this topic. Or another way to look at it is that it infuses and enhances the understanding of all these other topics. So yeah, it's really fascinating. And I first picked up on it because I was you say this, that we're dealing with this topic. It's not treated, in my view, enough as a separate topic. It's something in my readings that I run across incidentally, and I've been running across it incidentally for years. So when Evanique made the presentation and led the discussion on Mary Magdalene, and you invited some further discussion on it, I thought, well, this would be a great opportunity. The other thing I have to say, honestly, is having known Penny, my wife, for so long, I think she's just a magical person, and trying to understand how she can be such a magical person is with all these powers is just amazing. And that's studying the divine feminine has helped me do that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Just wonderful, wonderful introduction. Evanik, what interests you about this topic?
Well, I had been studying it before 52 Living Ideas. I had read a couple of books, The Feminine Genius. There's, I'm trying to remember the name of the book. It's by Glenda Doyle, and it's all about, female empowerment and, exploring the divine feminine within. And so, particularly in Western cultures, we notice that it's more of a it's more of a masculine power, and both are needed. Like, just want to be really clear that both are needed, but the feminine intuitive power is not as prominent in Western culture or in Western religion. But if you look at even male dominated books like the Bible, there are very powerful feminine women in there, like Mary Magdalene, like Esther, like Deborah. And there's other, Mary, the mother of Jesus, even the New Testament makes it a point that there were a lot of women who were at the cross when Jesus died. And there were a lot of women who supported Jesus in his ministry. And so, I think there's been like an imbalance. And so I was studying it just because, when you don't see yourself in something, you kind of go looking for it. So, and then what I found is that there is plenty of divine figures in religion, and in different types of religion. And so when Brian graciously recommended Goddess Power. So when I was reading that, I was like, there's so many figures that I want to study that, when we talked, I was like, I kind of want to make this a series because I want to focus on different women. Like, we both agreed, we're definitely going to focus on Isis. Kali is another one where she's such a not complicated, but she has so many different histories. Like, she's in African culture, she's in Indian culture, she's even in Western culture. So these are all these people that I want to really research deeply. And the only way for me not to be lazy about it is to do it for 52 Living Ideas. Like, I have to do it now. And so, but it's been fascinating. And working with Brian, I have to say, has been enlightening because he studied this topic and he knows more about it than I do. And so he's been giving me great ideas. Like I said, he gave me the recommendation. He also gave me another recommendation on a book that I am going to read and see. And, what I would say is that you don't have to read the book. Like, we're going to go over these different figures and, why they're important in culture. And it's so funny because with all these women, they have male counterparts. So I think it'll be interesting to study that as well. Like, who are their male counterparts? Because they're important to their story. All these stories like Isis and Osiris that you did so well that you mapped out. I was like, dang, I gotta follow that. But yeah, so it's just like, these partnerships. And I think that's what it's intended to be. It's intended to be a partnership between male power and female power, because both bring a lot to everyone's life. And everyone has these qualities within them. It's just, taking the time to explore it and learn about it. And the reason why I wanted to focus on divine feminine, like you said, Shrikant, like, a lot of it is male dominated already, but I don't want to like take the male out of it either. So I think we are going to explore both male and feminine, focused on the feminine, but notice the male is there. And so I just invite everyone, male, female. I know Brian said Penny's going to be a part of it too. So Hey, and she is magical. I would 100% agree with that, Brian. Penny is very magical. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to learning a lot about it and, just telling everybody what I've been learning. And so I'm looking forward to it.
Wonderful. So I have just a couple, two points. So firstly, I am just delighted with this, and I have complete confidence in your, both of your abilities to pull this off. So please feel free to take it in whatever direction you want. Be as ambitious as you want. Choose whatever, can take as long as you want. It doesn't really matter. Choose whatever format you think will do justice to this great topic. Second thing I would say is my recommendation is that only recommendation regarding content is that make sure that each of the pieces can be self-standing, in the sense that there is themes running through it. But if somebody comes in on the fifth of these, they should get some value from it. So it has to be kind of understandable. You don't have to recount everything in the beginning or end, but it has to be valuable to somebody who is just walking in. Because typically what our entire system is that because we have the YouTube versions of it, anybody who is walking in, if they get really into the topic at the fifth level, at the fifth episode, they can go ahead and read up everything they want anyway and join fully. So I just want to keep that open. But with that one minor kind of content point, just take it wherever you want to go. And I think it's going to be really, really good and valuable. Not only just for 52 living ideas, but for the culture in general. Because it is true that, and this is particularly true of Western culture, I think. Like, for example, in the Chinese culture, you have the yin yang. You have the Lao Tzu and the Taoism, which is more feminine. And you have the Confucianism, which is more masculine, both kind of coexisting. Even in the Indian culture, all the goddesses are there. They may not be as prominent as the gods, but they are there. And clearly, as as Brian is pointing out, there is that in the Western culture too. Mary is there, because you can't really understand life without both male and female, because life is created by male and female. So it's a natural part. So so I'm just delighted that you're starting. I'm going to announce it very soon, and I'm going to give you guys ability to add to it whenever you want, or you can just email it to me, whatever you prefer, and we will go from there. All right. So thank you very much, everybody. Tomorrow, I think we'll be able to almost wrap up this chapter. This is a fairly short chapter, and we should be able to wrap it up tomorrow. So very nice. Let's see, Natalia, you're here for the first time. How was the meetup? I think you came in the middle.
It's really good. It's really good.
Yeah, wonderful. Welcome, welcome. I hope you'll come back. All right, take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.